Good morning and welcome back to GSC Executives Podcast with your host, Caitlin Ty. Today, we are excited to have on Melanie Leech, who is the Chief Executive of the British Property Federation. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for being on. Have you got a busy day today, or?
Fairly typical for when I'm in London. So we're working in a hybrid way. So some days I'm at home, which are the days when I can write things or catch up with emails, a lot of Teams calls. But when I'm in London in the office, I like to be meeting face to face as much as possible. So I've got a few meetings later on this morning. And then this afternoon, I'm speaking at an affordable housing event.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's nice to do the admin stuff when you're working from home and then to take full advantage when you're kind of in London darting around.
Exactly.
Yeah. So kind of for our listeners, could you give me a brief elevator speech of your career to date, please?
Yes. I mean, I think the thing that characterises probably is lack of coherence and plan. So there's no great sort of, progression path. I suppose I've always done things that interested me. So I started out when I left university, I started out as a police officer in the Met. I did 4 years on the streets of Paddington Green in London. And then I moved across into the civil service. So You'll see sort of public service, public sector is where I started. And I suppose where my passion is sort of public service. So I went to civil service, worked in customs and excise, which is of course now customs and the revenue because it merged with the revenue. Then went to the cabinet office, worked in what's now DCMS. So I was head of arts policy for a bit, head of broadcasting policy. I did rail regulation. I ran the National Association for Police Authorities, which used to be the local authorities responsible for policing before we had the police and crime commissioners.
Yeah.
Back to the cabinet office, then immediately before coming to the British Property Federation, I ran the equivalent for food and drink companies, so the Food and Drink Federation. So that was a membership association for food and drink manufacturers like Coca-Cola and Nestle and Unilever. And the BPF, where I am now, the British Property Federation, is the membership association for all parts of the British property sector.
Oh, wow. You've had your finger in many pies, to say the least. So at BPF, you've recently launched a manifesto with key Labour politicians and policy experts. It's clear that there's a huge appetite and interest in the party to reform planning to grow the economy, such as building more homes, building stronger town centres and the green economy. How does this manifesto help to support the ambition of implementing this?
Yeah. So the manifesto is aimed at politicians of all parties, not just at Labour. And that's a sort of fairly typical thing that we would do before an election, is sort of set out our agenda for trying to work in partnership with whoever will be the next government. So we always start with, what it is that we already offer and what we can offer more with the right partnership with government. So we're a sector that turns over about £137.5 billion a year. We employ 2 million odd people directly, and we know we can do more. It's a thriving sector. It's a magnet, British property, for global investment. So we know we need that investment because we can't build more homes, we can't transform our town centres, we can't tackle the net zero challenge unless we attract more investment into the buildings that underpin all of our economic activity, all of our social activity. If you think about your day, everything you do, whether it's being at home or working or
it's in some sort of
building. Exactly. So the built environment is fundamental to life. And we know that a lot of our buildings need transforming to be fit for modern life, and we know we need more homes. We know we need more work premises to support new industries like life sciences. So the starting point really is, we're already a massive economic driver, but we can do much more, and national government won't achieve its objectives unless it really works in partnership with us to unlock the investment that we can bring and the activity that we can bring to deliver on its own objectives.
Yeah, because I guess as well, even though, well, as you kind of mentioned at the start, a lot of people are working hybridly, as you say, it's not just offices, it's homes as well. So wherever you are, it needs investment because as the population's growing as well, it's never ending.
Exactly. And it's shops and it's restaurants and it's bars and it's hotels and it's, whatever takes your fancy in terms of your leisure time. You probably do it in a building, or at least a building's connected to it. The outdoor spaces are really important too, because increasingly our members don't think about just a building. They think about sort of what's around that building, and they think about place. So a lot of our members are involved in building not as I say, not just individual buildings, but whole communities and whole places. And of course, open spaces that we can enjoy and connected spaces that you can walk to rather than need a car or even public transport are just as important to that quality of life.
Definitely, definitely. So as you've held the position of chief executive for 9 years, what would you say is your biggest achievement to date?
I'm going to be greedy and ask for two.
Oh, okay. So that's a good thing. Sounds good to you.
Yeah. The first one is probably 6 or 7 years ago now. We created our network for junior professionals in the industry, BPF Futures. And it's now about 2,500 strong, growing sort of by the day. And it is the most fantastic community of talented, sparky, bright individuals you could ever hope to meet. Very diverse community, reflecting diversity that's starting to come into the industry. And we may want to talk some more about that. And the vision, there are lots of networks out there for young professionals, but the vision for BPF Futures, which I think makes it unique and distinctive and is what is attractive to those young professionals, is really to give them a voice in our work. So it's not just about meeting each other and networking, it's about learning and it's about having a voice. So we now have BPF Futures representatives on our committees that, it helps shape our work at the BPF. We have the chair of the BPF Futures Advisory Board on our main BPF board. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we wanted to make it open to the public sector people who work in property too. So that young professionals in the private sector and young professionals in the public sector could kind of grow up together in their careers. Because one of the things we know gets in the way of some of those beneficial partnerships that I was talking about is lack of trust. So if they've known each other and worked together and understand each other's perspectives from very young in their careers, then the vision is that will pay back in 20 years' time when one of them's running one of the big property companies and one of them's running the department.
I remember this person
exactly.
from way back
when. I've known them forever and I know how they, exactly. So I think that's I can see the short-term benefits in the people that are engaging with us, the way we're using our policy work, with the way we're weaving them into our events and our work more generally, and the partnership that they're forging with senior people in the industry. So we have a mentoring scheme, and we're very lucky at the BPF because the most senior people regularly engage in our work. So they're learning directly from the chief executives of listed property companies or the people who run pension funds and so on. And I think that's unique. So that's sort of paying back in the short, but the long-term benefits will be long after I've left this role, I hope, in that building of that trust and that understanding of the industry.
And just to kind of, as you say, the fact that it's not just a short-term thing, it is the longevity of it must be so great to know that these connections are all happening because of the futures that you're doing now. So that's really good. So kind of on the flip side of that, what would you say is your biggest challenge that you faced during your career?
Yeah, I didn't got to my second achievement, did I? So I'll pop.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's my fault. I forgot about that. But anyway, let's stick with BPF Futures as my achievement. And I'll maybe get a chance to come talk later about the other thing that I'm particularly excited that we're doing. Challenges. I thought about this quite a lot before this morning. I think like a lot of women, and it's not unique to women, but I think it's more prevalent probably in women. I suffer from imposter syndrome the whole time.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So I was sort of thinking, okay, so when was the time I most felt that? As I moved into a new role,
and I times in a day.
Well, exactly. But I think that would have to be when I left the police, went into the civil service. So I had a great education. So I was highly educated. I knew I could of work in a policy environment, but I hadn't been doing it for 4 years. I've been doing a very practical job, not really using my brain, to write policy papers or think about issues. And so when I went into customs and excise, it was actually quite a soft landing because I was working on very practical issues. Like the first job I did at customs, working on the customs controls at each end of the Channel Tunnel. The Channel Tunnel was still being dug at the time, so it wasn't even open.
Oh, wow.
So we were thinking about how would it work. So it was quite a practical set of challenges. So that was in a sense a soft landing. And then I did a couple of other jobs at customs, and then I got the chance to go and run the Cabinet Secretary's private office. So right at the heart of government in the Cabinet
Wow.
office. Very sort of intellectually demanding, but also, kind of very rarefied atmosphere compared to the kind of practical
That you've
atmosphere
been
of
used
customs
to,
exercise.
yeah.
So I put my hat in the ring for this job, never thinking I'd get it, and was offered it. And I do remember even now, and this is a long time ago now, that first day walking in to be Sir Robin Butler, he's now Lord Butler, but at the time he was Sir Robin Butler, Cabinet Secretary of the day, his private secretary, running his office right at the heart of government, thinking, what have I done? I can't possibly do this.
Why are you thinking
Exactly, I need to go home and hide under the duvet. But of course I didn't. But that was challenging. But I think, hopefully that's relatable because, that was the biggest single thing and it was massive.
Yeah.
But actually on a much smaller level, it happens to a lot of us, as you were saying, all of the time, every day. You might find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, can I do this?
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? Me? It's me.
It's like, come on.
Exactly.
But I think even though initially, as you say, it is that, oh gosh, why me? What am I doing? I think once you kind of get yourself out of that comfort zone, you're able to reflect on it. And even if the outcome isn't as what you've expected, obviously, thankfully, in your case, it was good. But obviously, sometimes it's not. It's a learning curve.
Yes.
And as long as you learn from that experience, whether it be good or bad, it's an experience. So you've just got to kind of, take that leap and hope that it goes well.
I think that's right.
So did you want to talk about your other achievement?
Well, the other thing, which sort of comes into sort of next 5 years as well, is last autumn we merged with the UK PropTech Association.
Yes.
So we'd been working closely with them for a while, right from when they were started, probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And it became increasingly obvious, I think, to me certainly, but also to the leadership of the UK PropTech Association.
Yeah.
That the best way of achieving the vision that we shared of trying to bring property and tech closer together and get a sort of different and better quality of conversation between the two around, what the challenges in property were and how innovative, smart people could, use their skills and their talents to solve those problems. Because what I saw was, lots of really smart tech companies inventing solutions to problems that didn't really exist because they didn't understand what the real problems were.
Yeah.
And on the other side, lots of property people who are really fed up of tech people trying to sell them smart widgets and stuff.
Another AI thing or
exactly.
something. Yeah.
So we thought there has to be a better way of creating a platform and a place where you can talk frankly about challenges and finding solutions in an environment where the tech guys aren't trying to hard sell and the property guys aren't kind of feeling, why am I having this conversation? Because all I'm going to do is some of them trying to sell me another app
which isn't going to help with what I need help.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the vision. And we talked about it sort of through last year, I suppose, in the UK PropTech Association had to go through a process of engaging with their members to get behind the idea of merging with us.
Right.
But that went really well. There was overwhelming support for the idea. And I spent a lot of time talking to UK PropTech Association members who meet in very different kind of venues to the kind of venues that property companies are used to meeting in. So I learned some new places and some much more quirky and interesting parts of London. And we finally did it. So the UK PropTech Association last October became a subsidiary company of the British Property Federation.
Yeah.
And I now have the 3 women who were running the UKPA as part of my team, and we've got a joint program, our Tech and Innovation program, which is absolutely pointed at trying to bring those 2 communities together in a whole range of different ways. And it's really going well, but I think the longer term vision again is, full integration, one conversation, and that will take a little while.
Oh, of course.
But we've made a great start, which is fantastic.
Exactly. The ball's rolling forward.
Exactly.
So do you have any, obviously that's in the kind of coming future, but do you have any personal, professional goals which you are wanted to achieve in the next 5 years?
Yeah, at a personal level, I suppose, one of the things that frustrates me is because I sort of sit on top of everything and I have to sort of be able to kind of keep that helicopter view to do
Yeah.
my job effectively, because I've got technical experts who understand things.
Mhm.
But if something interests me, I don't get the chance to really, I don't get the
Delve
time
deep into
to delve more deeply into it. So I'd love to sort of delve a bit more into the sustainability issues that we're working with.
Mhm.
I'd love to delve a bit more into the tech agenda, actually, and find out more about that. So I'm going to try and create the time to do that. She says,
Do we need this enough hours a day?
nervously and ambitiously. And the other thing for me is, I won't be in this job in 5 years' time.
Mhm.
Having done, this is my 10th year.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's healthy for someone to be in my kind of a role for too long.
Yes.
Because however good you are, there's always a time when refreshing, someone coming with
when
new
to
ideas.
kind of step back.
Exactly.
Yes.
The organisation thinks like I think now because it's so used to working with me, although people come and go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's always a time, there's always a time when it's right for a refresh. So starting to think about what after the BPF looks like for me.
Yeah.
And that's not a spoiler that I'm about to go, but on a 5-year horizon, I need to start to think about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Brilliant. So kind of what features would you describe would make a good leader, and would you describe yourself as a good leader?
So what I've learned is there's no blueprint. There's no one model of what a good leader looks like.
Yes.
I always remember when I was running the Food and Drink Federation, one of my presidents, so you tend to have elected leaders that come from your members, as well as the permanent executive staff that run the organisation.
Right, okay, yeah.
So one of my presidents was very much an alpha male. I mean, he was larger than life in every way. And I also remember him saying to me, he would sort of come in and sort of boom, good morning to everybody in his the building that in the offices that he ran. And I remember him saying to me once, I don't, if you're in the building, I think people should know you're there,
before see that sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly. And as I say, he very much was, kind of traditional command and control type, But to his eternal credit, one of the people who ran one of the business units within the global business that he ran in the UK was not like that at all. He was very much a sort of and this is a few years ago now, so it's probably more, things have moved on a bit, but not that much.
Yeah.
It was very much more of a sort of consensus build, a lot of soft skills, quite quietly spoken. Didn't really announce himself into a room, just came into a room, but still had presence. But
Yeah.
And I really respected that he'd identified that person could lead just as effectively as someone like him.
Yes.
And he did, and he was a very good leader of that business. So I suppose that was a kind of really reinforced to me what I instinctively knew, because I'm not alpha,
You're not pigeonholed into having to be that kind of.
There are different styles that can be just as effective.
Yeah.
And it's then how you recognise what you're good at and what your style is.
Yes.
And make sure, that you mitigate it when you need to. So, I'm not a command and control person. I'm not a kind of big presence.
Yeah.
But I can be what I need to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I need to be, and that goes to that imposter syndrome point as well. Sometimes you just need to put the personality on and the presence on and kind of own it.
It's like, come on, you've got to have a quick talk to yourself before you go in.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to kind of recognise there are times when you need to play a role.
Yeah.
And be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And you also have to kind of go, well, what am I, where are my vulnerabilities if this is the kind of leader I want to be?
Yeah.
And how do I make sure I've got the right team surrounding me to mitigate that, so that everybody plays to their strengths in the team. Yeah. But you can be the best that you can be at what you do, and other people can play their parts too. So I am the leader that I am. Yes. And I've kind of learned to live with that's who I am, and every now and then I think, probably again, most of us kind of look at other people and really admire them and think, oh, I wish I could be a bit more like that. Yeah. But actually you can't. And if you're not true to yourself and understand yourself, then you're not going to be a good leader, because you're not going to be authentic. Yeah. So there's something about authenticity too, I think, and recognizing what you bring. And then figuring out what else you need surrounding you. Yeah.
Yeah. So with being a female in a very dominated business, how would you say this has impacted you?
Yeah, well, I mean, property is quite male dominated, but I've only been doing it for 9 years, and I've come in at the top of my tree, if you like. So. But remember, I started out in the Metropolitan Police Force in central London in the middle of the 80s. Mm-hmm. So that kind of taught me everything about being kind of different because I mean, not only was I a female at a time when that was still relatively uncommon.
Yeah.
So, it was routine that, so you work in cohorts called, we'll call them shifts. And you were routinely the only woman in your cohort, so that moved together through the shift patterns, your relief. So you would be the only woman, almost certainly.
Yeah.
There was, I think, one female sergeant in a station where there were probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 sergeants. There was no one above the rank of inspector, and the one female inspector, who was a detective, wasn't based at the station. She was sort of area based.
Yeah.
But also it was very unusual to be a graduate. I was an Oxford maths graduate, and that was, kind of very weird. So put all of those things together, and you were different. You were different.
Imposter syndrome right there.
Yeah. But also a need to kind of prove yourself in a different way, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you learn how to adapt. I mean, that job, partly because of those things, but also partly because of the nature of what policing is.
Yeah.
Kind of taught me. I mean, it taught me the law at the time. I know I still kind of dream about the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. But it also taught me all those sort of soft skills that I still use today. Whether that's sort of being able to read situations, read people, negotiate your way through situations, because you don't, as a female police officer, you're not going to be able to do what a sort of a 6'2" male officer can do in certain situations, which is sort of exert or physical authority. So you have to find another way of doing it as a 5'5" woman police officer. In a situation where you've got 6 drunken men or whatever, threatening to get out. You've got to find other ways to deal with things. So I suppose you have to turn it around, and you have to say, how do I use the skills that I've got to navigate this situation?
Kind of going back again to being a good leader, what skills you've got and how you can play on them.
Exactly. But I think even, starting out today, you think about what advice you can give to people who don't feel comfortable in the work environment for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So you have to find your allies. You have to find your own path through it.
Yes.
And be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And what's, I suppose, much more likely now is that the help and support will be there.
Yeah.
Because all the work we've done, certainly within property over the last few years, it may not be where you expect to find it. And it may not be where it should be in terms of your line manager or your colleagues, but the help will be there and the support will be there. You just might
have to look for it a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So how do you feel like the industry will change in the future? And what changes would you like to bring into the industry regarding diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. I mean, we are making progress. I mean, it's never, excuse me, it's never quick enough.
Of course.
Us,
it's a process.
Yeah, and it's a long-term thing. But we're definitely making progress, and I think that will continue. And actually, if I think about how the industry is changing anyway, it's kind of, I think, playing into the hands of those who want to bring difference and want to bring, a different kind of skill set and approach, because as a property industry, we're becoming much more focused on people as our customers.
Yeah.
We're becoming much more focused on real estate as a service, and the fact that you need to think about, you can't just own an asset and collect the rent. You've got to think about, is the asset working for my tenants? How can I make it work better for them?
Yeah.
You've got to think about sustainability and managing it more efficiently and all those kind of things. So, and then of course we've got technology, which is disrupting, nibbling away at disruption. It will get more disruptive. So the kind of traditional mold of what people think the real estate industry is, and the type of people and the type of jobs that you do within it, is changing.
Yeah.
And as that happens, then increasingly companies realise they need to look for more diverse skill sets. They need to look for different kind of people coming into the industry. And that also then enables them more effectively to represent the communities we're trying to serve. Because if you don't have people shaping ideas and taking decisions who look like and can understand the communities we're trying to come in and disrupt and build in, how can you hope to do that as successfully as you could do. So I think the industry's moving in a direction which should help to accelerate the trend of becoming more diverse and inclusive, because that's the skill set we're going to need as the industry changes.
Yeah. But as I say, it's just a long process. It'll take time, but one day we'll get there.
But those disruptive trends might help to accelerate it.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing the diversity and inclusion program?
I mean, I think it is the sort of making it stick.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happened in the real estate sector, and you look at some of the work that Real Estate Balance, one of the organisations working to champion diversity in real estate, they do regular surveys. It seems to me, if you look at what those surveys say, we've made a lot of progress. There's a lot of senior leaders really committed to EDI and to driving that in their businesses. So there's a lot of great leadership out there. But still haven't got enough women, let alone ethnic minorities, coming through into the executive leadership roles. But you can see there's a lot of progress at board level and non-executive, and that will take time.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great leadership there. You've got a lot of fantastically diverse young people coming into this industry, as I was talking about BPF Futures and elsewhere, driving a sort of bottom-up movement.
So you can see that in however many years' time they will be able to get to that position.
Exactly. But what the surveys show is it kind of gets a bit lost in the middle.
Yeah.
Because particularly in larger businesses, there's always that challenge of driving change in culture all the way from the top all the way down through an organisation.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge is that kind of middle tier, and that's can't tarnish everybody with the same brush imagination, but we've got probably a generation of people in the middle who are too far removed from accountability to the senior leadership.
Yeah.
And, not really listening to what's coming bottom up to change, and, won't be here in 5 to 10 years' time.
Yeah.
So that's partly, I think, a generational and a time thing. But it's also, I think, a recognition that once you get into the culture piece, it's really hard work. I was thinking about, the fact that around something like unconscious bias.
Yeah.
You do training on it, and we did it here at the BPF, but, we also do things like media training, and what's the first thing you get told at the end of your media training course? It's that unless you practice it, you will lose these skills and you'll need to do it again in 6 months' time.
It's like, so am I practicing this every day then?
But it's the same kind of thing, if you kind of go on an unconscious bias course and then you go away from it, then how do you keep alive what you've learned?
Yeah.
Because it's not a question of, it's not as overt and it's not as obvious as going back and thinking, well, I'm recruiting, so how do I make sure I kind of try and neutralise the process as much as possible to give everyone an equal chance to come through? And how do I mitigate my sort of the likelihood that I will go and look for someone like me? If you're doing a tangible task like that, it's relatively straightforward to say, how do I, make sure I try and make this process as fair and inclusive as I can?
Yeah.
But if it's just how do I go through my day, making sure I'm not, it's how do you actually practice, in inverted commas, that, and how do you keep those skills alive? So I think that's the other challenge is, how do you maintain the passion and commitment that we all have, or a lot of us have, but how do you, remember it and kind of live it all the time? Yeah. Because we do all have our kind of inbuilt biases and things that we
of course,
collected over
Everyone
many
thinks
years.
Differently, yeah.
So I think that's the challenge, I think.
There's always a challenge there. There's always a challenge. So kind of looking back at your career, is there anything that you would change at all?
I don't think so. I've only once in my time, I mean, mostly I've chosen jobs I wanted to do and applied for them and been lucky enough to do them.
Yeah.
I've only once in all my career, I think, got that choice wrong.
Yeah.
But as you were saying earlier on, I wouldn't really change that because I learned from that.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say,
I had a very uncomfortable 18 months doing a role that, with hindsight, wasn't a great role for me, wasn't a great working environment. But I learned how to cope with that, and I learned how to do that job.
Yeah. Even if you didn't.
Notwithstanding that.
Yeah, exactly.
I learned some really interesting things related to the subject of the thing. So I'm not really one to kind of look back and regret,
Yeah, as long as you learn from it.
Yeah.
And as you say, it's all an experience. Not every experience you're going to have is going to be great, but you've also just kind of got to brush yourself off and go, right, what's the next thing?
Yeah. I suppose the other thing is, there have been definitely times when I could have gone one of two ways, know. And I don't regret the choices that I made. Leaving the police would be one, because I was kind of on a fast track promotion scheme, so, could I have been a chief constable?
It's the ifs and buts though that you don't know.
But I don't regret any of the choices that I made. But I do kind of regret that I won't have more time to, I'd quite like to go back and do the other one as well. Take the other part as well. See what would have happened.
Exactly. I know. It's strange how if you you get to a crossroads, and if you go this way, you end up as CEO, or if you'd have gone the other way, what option and the ifs and buts of what could have been if you'd gone down that route. And I guess it's nice to reflect, but also the position that you're in today and kind of all your future plans and what you've done. I guess it's hard to you shouldn't look back and in a bad light. It's made you who you are today. And yeah. Well, thank you very much, Melanie, for being on the podcast. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the GSC Executives Podcast. Today's conversation was hosted and recorded by Caitlin Ty, with editing and production managed by Stephen Smith. The podcast is produced by GSC Executives in conjunction with Daniel Owen Limited. For more details about our executive search solutions, as well as upcoming episodes, please visit our website, gscexecutives.co.uk. If you're keen to hear more industry insights, please consider subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, continue to lead with excellence.